Well, we're going to get started. Those of you who don't know me, my name's Jason Murphy, and I'm a teacher with Against the Stream here in Los Angeles. And I'm broadcasting live from my home in Mar Vista, California. And I hope that you're all doing well. And we're going to do some meditation. I'm going to talk about some Buddhism. I've been going through a theme known as the paramis, or the 10 perfections. So we'll be focusing on the next stage in that development, that teaching. And I'll do my best to convey the Buddhist teachings to the best of my ability, or my understanding, and my experience. And yeah, so we'll go from there. I was just up north, and I was visiting family and friends and Dharma friends, and I received my bowl. This is my bowl that I was given when I was given permission to teach. So one of my teachers, Mary Grace Orr, who was one of my first teachers, gave me this bowl and bell, and I'm happy to have it back because I've missed it. Missed it in the sense that what it symbolizes, and I really like the sound. It's better than my little tiny bells. So we'll use that today. And I think I'm going to actually just bring it to the center too once we're able to, so we can have this bell with us all the time. All right. So finding a posture that's workable and that's sustainable, where you can be relaxed and alert. And there's no right or wrong way to sit as far as posture-wise. It's a good idea to have your back be upright. It's a good idea to not. Sometimes people lift their head as if, I don't know, they're going to see more clearly the future or something. It's a good idea to just try to find a balance between your lifting up and lifting down in your neck or your throat. It's also helpful to have the spine be upright. Yeah. It's also helpful to have the eyes closed, although it's not necessary. Some people prefer to have their eyes open, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with having your eyes open or closed. All right, so let's begin opening up to the comings and goings of sound. Sounds outside the room. Sounds inside the room. And so settling in. And an instruction I've been using today is just to kind of repeat a few times, arriving here, or just here, allowing that to be a calling into the habitual mind or the mind states, a calling into the breath and the body, awareness here. So, as best you can, the invitation is to inhabit this body with your awareness. Breath, sensations, again and again, here. The wisdom of the in and out breath. Of course, whenever the attention wanders off, which it likely will, in that moment of recognition, right there, bring in some kindness, some compassion, knowing that the mind will wander off. And then when you invite it back, here, just using that simple phrase or word, here, arriving here, this sitting, breathing body. If the mind seems restless or agitated, knowing that the mind is restless or agitated without a sense of judgment, and just returning back here. this sitting, breathing body. Allowing the breath to be an anchor, connecting us to this present time experience. Ever changing, constantly unfolding, ever a new opportunity to arrive here, this sitting, breathing body. again and again. Going to recognize if the attention wanders off. Perhaps noting the mental state or the feeling state in the body. As we aim the attention back, arriving here, this breath, this sitting, breathing body, with a sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind. Again and again. What can be known here in this observation, connection with this sitting, breathing body, the different mind states and sensations. Breathing in, calming the mind. Breathing out, relaxing the body. Breathing in, calming the mind. Breathing out, relaxing the body. In, calm. Out, relax. For this, the last 5 minutes or so, the invitation is to really increase your effort, both relaxed and alert. See if you can really notice every aspect of the in and out breath, every sensation. Try to be as present for the beginning, the middle, the end of each breath until the sound of the bell. All right. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. Guess it kind of depends, yeah? Depends on the moment, depends on the day. All right. I'm curious, is there anyone that has, just any questions specifically on meditation instructions and meditation itself? I'll open up before we get into the topic for the evening. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Is there anyone that has any particular questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mike. Severine's my girlfriend. That's why you see her name.
Okay.
I was curious, before we found Against the Stream, we had been to another Buddhism school or whatever the name is. And it was a different sect as well. I'm forgetting how to pronounce it. I think it's like Nichiren, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And one thing I liked with the way they meditated there, and I'm wondering whether this can apply here or some version of it, was that they had chanting. And theirs particularly was Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
Mm-hmm.
And, whether it's that phrase itself or another one, I think when I did use that, it really helped me in terms of the process of kind of escaping my own thoughts and that sort of thing. And not like I want to cheat or find an easy way, but just as
an easy way would be good, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like anything that helps as long as it's in the right spirit. And it did really help. At first it's a little strange feeling to just repeat something over and over because I don't have any experience with that or hadn't. But I found once getting into it after a rhythm and after maybe 5 or 10 minutes, it really put me out of my own head. And I was just wondering if in this practice in Theravada Buddhism, if that's acceptable, if there's any mantras in this one, if that's an okay practice to have, because I did like it. It did really serve me well in those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for your question. What's your name again?
Mike.
Mike, thanks for your question, Mike. Yeah, so that, like, particularly like that, I've actually done some of that practice. That's more, it's a little bit more of it's kind of specific to like concentration, probably very similar to what's called TM or transcendental meditation. Is very similar, where there's this one phrase that you're repeating over and over and over again pretty quickly and rhythmically and with a group. And it is powerful. It does have a powerful, kind of focus. And there is something similar, but it's not exactly the same within Theravada Buddhism. At Against the Stream, we have a kind of a stylized, kind of particular, kind of, I don't know what you call it, a bent, or just it's our style. And we don't do a lot of chanting. Most of the chanting that's done in Theravada Buddhism is like reciting teachings from the Buddha. It's usually kind of monk chanting, and it's usually for memorization, not necessarily for the kind of transcendental state that in Nichiren Buddhism they're kind of going for. Although, that being said, actually, even just tonight, I did give you calm, relax. And so like that was tonight's kind of like mantra instruction, that you could, breathing in, calm, breathing out, relax. But that, it's a little slower. It's a little bit more particular to present time experience, where Namiho Renge Kyo is just a very, like, that's it. Like, that's what's going. And what that does is it kind of parts the mind. It's kind of like it creates where nothing else exists. And that's why you feel the way you were describing feeling. And I felt that way doing that as well. What we teach, what we practice, what is considered the original teachings of the Buddha is vipassana, or insight practice. And even though you can have some really great concentrated experiences with, kind of repeating phrases like that, less likely to have insight. And that was at least that's the teaching of the Buddha. Not that concentration isn't useful, because it is useful to calm the mind, and that is kind of considered like could be considered like a preliminary practice, which I also have found useful and helpful. So doing something like that, like calm, relax, or when I trained in some of the monasteries in Buddhism, in Thailand, they would give us the phrase Bu Do. So we'd say Bu Do, like in, out, and like Buddha is awake. So it can be similar in that way, but it's usually not the same kind of speed and tone that's found in the type of Buddhism that you're talking about. I think that's particularly a sect of Buddhism that is Japanese in origin, but then it has its own, kind of group of practices. So so not exactly the goal in Vipassana, where the goal is to really kind of see clearly that our minds are out of control, be acquainted with what's happening in the moods and in the body, and gaining insight and deeper what we would call wisdom, versus just kind of like with the way you described it, when you're like kind of checked out or altered states, which is awesome, but is it leading to freedom, or is it just making us feel good for a little while? But I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you ask
something? I guess I would say one more thing about that is it also found within Theravadan Buddhism, and particularly within Against the Stream, we use heart practices, and I think those repeated phrases can be really useful and transformative, and can be used in that same way. And I have used that on meditation retreats, where I would say, like, may I feel safe, may I be happy, may I be at ease, just over and over and over. May I feel safe, may I be happy, may I be at ease. And again, it's doing a similar thing, but it's in English, which is useful, I think. And because then we actually know what we're saying. And there's another piece of that there's a tenderizing of the heart. There's kind of a opening that's happening as well. So that's a similar way of using the metta phrases as a concentration practice, like you're talking about. It's a great question. Yeah, there's like, I don't know, 5 different like main types of Buddhism, and each one has its own kind of, some are similar and some are different, but most are fairly different. Yeah. Any other questions specifically about kind of meditation before I get into the topic, which the topic will be wisdom tonight? Okay, so we'll open up again for questions after the topic. Wisdom, you got it or you don't. Not really. Actually, from the Buddhist perspective, I think it's important to talk, like, wisdom is mentioned. It's the end goal. It's mentioned as the like, what is nibbana, like enlightenment, is that wisdom. Wisdom is thought about in a few different ways. And from the perfection or the paramis, standpoint, the 10 perfections, wisdom is something that is developed and begins to develop pretty early on, actually. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but this is also kind of what we call insight. But I think it's useful just to talk about what isn't wisdom from the Buddhist perspective, right? What isn't wisdom from the Buddhist perspective is confusion. What isn't wisdom is ignorance. What isn't wisdom is kind of blind, like lack of clarity, delusion. So when we're talking about developing wisdom, what we're really talking about is breaking free from all of those things. So seeing clearly, having, gaining more clarity, not being confused. So moving out of confusion, which, I don't know if you guys experience this in your own practice, but doubt and confusion can be very closely linked. So as a hindrance, it's considered doubt. And well, even further, as a, confusion or delusion is just an aspect, just a flavor of, or I should say doubt is a flavor of confusion or delusion. And they tend to work with each other. So when we're talking about kind of awakening, what we're really talking about is these different things, like gaining clarity, seeing clearly, coming out of delusion or confusion. What I love about the word ignorant is I remember when I was a kid or something, people would say like, so-and-so's ignorant, or even people have called me ignorant before. And I remember I'd really take offense. And I actually had a teacher one time say, well, ignorance is just lack of knowledge. And so that's actually really easy to change. So it's not like being called stupid or like where someone can't get it, and that implies some action. So people can come from ignorance, which is a lot of what's talked about in Buddhism, not seeing clearly is ignorance, to wisdom, which is seeing clearly. And the way that this kind of, like I've talked about the 10 perfections, and I'll just kind of run through them quickly, and they're in order for a reason, they feed off each other. The first is giving or generosity. The second is virtue or morality, I often call integrity. The third, renunciation, which we went over last time. The fourth, wisdom. The fifth, energy or effort. The sixth, patience. The seventh is truthfulness. The eighth is determination. The ninth is loving kindness. And the 10th is equanimity. And so we're working through these. And the first three we spent a few weeks on, and they're kind of considered kind of prerequisites. So always working in generosity, always finding new ways. Can I be generous to myself? Can I be generous to others? Which is leading us to living in a non-harming way, and letting go of greed, which is one of the things that really gets in the way of wisdom, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So this renunciation is also kind of seeing that grasping and being able to kind of let go or let be, which leads automatically into wisdom or seeing more clearly. And one of the ways that I like that Buddhism really talks about is that they just talk about how greed or craving or desire leads to ignorance, because it leads to this kind of closed-minded, if I only had A, B, or C, then I would be happy, which is delusion. And this is one of the major insights of the Buddha, is to see clearly that anything outside of ourselves that is a thing or that gives us temporary pleasure is not actually gonna lead to freedom from suffering. And that is the wisdom in kind of seeing from renunciation and generosity and the kind of some of the moralistic, precepts. We begin to kind of, it begins to kind of break the delusion, particularly in our kind of capitalist culture, where, and then we're moving into this, the kind of whatever, we just had Black Friday and Cyber. Now that it's Black Friday, I think there's probably a Black Saturday and a Sunday too, and then your Cyber Monday, just in case you missed it, right? Which I actually didn't participate in any of that, not because I wouldn't, just because I was like, do I really need anything? I don't really need anything right now, so I just didn't really go into that. But it is part of that kind of like, if I only had, then I'll be happy, right? Or successful, or, whatever the kind of story is that we're talking about. So, so that's, part of looking at or talking about kind of greed, and greed as a way of wisdom or even ignorance. So wisdom, from the Dharmic perspective is, well, let's see, I'll talk about this for a minute, right? And then I'll get into breaking down the different ways in which within Buddhism they talk about wisdom. So wisdom from the Dharmic perspective is the proof that all this works, and wisdom is the knowledge of that proof turning into experience, right? So this idea of how do we develop wisdom? Wisdom, I used to think, and maybe you did too, that wisdom was a state to obtain, and once you obtained wisdom, then you were done. Like, you didn't really need to obtain anymore, right? So Buddhism really looks at, there's kind of three different types of wisdom. That there is the learning. So there is knowledge gained, or what's called the wisdom of theory. So knowledge gained, so like reading books, listening to talks, listening to teachers, kind of comprehending the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, reading and understanding about karma, to whatever degree you're capable of at that moment. So this is kind of learning. And this is the first type of wisdom. So maybe it was for you as a book that inspired you, or listening to a talk by the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh, or some other teacher, or maybe it was reading one of Noah's books, or whatever it is that kind of turned you on. That is a process. That's the first kind of process of gaining wisdom. And if you think about it, I mean, we're definitely set up this way in our educational system. There are other kinds of wisdom, but that kind of knowledge base isn't wisdom, but it's leading to what we're calling the Dharmic wisdom, which is the first level wisdom of kind of theory. So you're developing, you're starting to kind of see things as they maybe as they are. And then the second level is the wisdom of application or practice, right? So this, right, and even in this, we're talking about the prerequisites, giving and virtue and renunciation, leading to beginning in some level of wisdom, which then automatically moves into effort or energy, application, applying. You can read 1,000 books, and if you've never meditated and sat with your mind and your breath and your body as we do, then there will be no deeper Dharmic wisdom to obtain. So that's a part of this, this whole process of, coming out of delusion, is delusion being the status quo, delusion being what we're all caught in, as the Buddha talked about, that we, being the human race, have dust in our eyes. In other words, we don't see clearly. We're caught in the fog of greed, hatred, and delusion, and that the beginning starting to kind of gain some clarity, which comes from really learning to sit with practice, with application, and then testing this out. Oh, is impermanence as a theory a reality? Can I experience what is impermanence? Can I experience what this first noble and second noble truth are, that there is suffering in this world and that craving is the cause of that suffering? Can I know that from really kind of drilling down into it? And this could happen in your first meditation, and this could happen 10 years into meditation, so it's different for different people. But yeah, that's part of it, right? So delusion, in my opinion, is really a deeper form of ignorance. And so, if we are ignorant about kind of certain knowledge or way of being, we will act out of that ignorance and then form beliefs and or opinions based on that kind of lack of knowledge. So this is where we're coming out of delusion. And I really see like racism is a perfect example of this. Like belief that one group is superior to another group is ignorance. It's delusion. It's not based in any kind of reality other than fictitious. It was created. Americanism is another example, right? This kind of, we are somehow better because we live, or even by coastalism, right? Like California and maybe East Coast better than the middle of the country, right? And the list goes on and on and on, how we are always kind of separating and better than, less than, so much apart. It's in Buddhism, it's called mana. Mana means comparing. Mana means conceit. So this kind of constant comparing better than, less than, which is a form of conceit, which is a form of delusion, because it's a form of seeing that I am separate from you, which is then the third characteristic of existence that we can examine, which is not self. This idea of no separate individual self. That we are really, that there's no me, there's no mine, that there is really just a combination of parts and personality that is causes and conditions have created. And we all have a mind, and that mind remembers habitually thoughts and behaviors that have come up and experiences that we've had, and that creates what we call a personality. But we're so much more than that, and that's the delusional piece, is to believe that there's the better than, less than attached to that. That has anything to do with skin color or where you live, or whether you're poor or rich, or just all of those ways in which we separate, just feeds the delusion. And so wisdom is breaking free, or seeing through that, which is the third aspect of what we call, kind of wisdom from the Buddhist perspective. So the first is kind of learning or theory, kind of like beginning to kind of understand, like, oh yeah, karma kind of makes sense. I can see how that would be a principle, but I haven't really experienced karma in my own practice, or impermanence, or not self, or dukkha, like suffering, right? So all of these we can understand kind of theoretically, and then when we start to practice, and like I said, sometimes it doesn't take much practice. There's more clarity that comes. There's that kind of second level of wisdom, which is experience. Oh, oh, I've experienced impermanence for myself, which is what the Buddha encourages and talked about and continues to talk about, through all of his teachings. Just this, kind of, can you see it for yourself? And when you know it to be true for yourself, only then, accept it as wisdom, accept it as truth. So it's not just like believe it because it's a doctrine, which I've always appreciated, and you'll hear us all talk about, because we all really appreciate that, because none of us want to be sheep. I've never been. If I was ever a sheep, it was a black sheep, and they usually go in the other direction. So yeah. So the Buddhism really, and the Buddhist teaching really, the Buddha Dharma really kind of points to that. All right, so the Buddha Dharma, is the direct coming into understanding of the truth of the Buddhist teaching. And then through learning, reflection, and development of meditation, we begin living in a way that supports this new understanding, will naturally lead to wisdom. And the word wisdom in Buddhism also means panya. Panya means wisdom and discernment. So what you could think about in this kind of third aspect of wisdom is realization, which is kind of discernment, like seeing what's true and not true for you and in existence, and then having more and more clarity of that, which is causing what we call realizations. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so those are the kind of the three stages of wisdom. There's the wisdom of theory, and the wisdom of application, and then the wisdom of realization. And this is what's pointed to in the teachings of the Buddha. So this is a mind training, and the Buddha gave us kind of a tactical offense to battle the roots of our suffering. Right? And this is one list of many. I mean, it would be, that there's generosity and loving kindness, and patience, and hearing and understanding the Dharma as part of what's in these 10 perfections. In other words, these 10 aspects to continually work at, continually apply, continually practice, so that we can gain our own understanding, our own deeper kind of level of realization for ourselves. It's not something that we can just it's not something that we can just tell someone about. I mean, it's also, I think, one of the reasons why there's not a lot of proselytization within Buddhism, which is another reason why I really appreciate it. That we offer practice, we offer teachings, but we're not going out and ringing the bell, and trying to bring in the flock, so to speak, which can be found in maybe some other religions that are kind of proselytizing, come, we'll save you, because in Buddhism it's like you need to save yourself. We'll give you the tools, but you have to do the work. Yeah. Let's see. Something else I was gonna, part of the reading from this book, the Paramis, there was, I wanted to read this. Give me a second. It's part of the reflections about wisdom. Yeah, here it is. So, so this is a reflection on the Parami of wisdom from Ajahn Sucitto. It says, notice and give consideration to the fact that when you acknowledge and focus on your thoughts and emotions, the mind enters the experience of being aware of them rather than um, being them, right? So enhance that awareness by giving it emphasis. Puts it into the four of kind of disengaging from the activities of the mind and heart in order to know them more fully. Notice that you can do this for a few moments anyway, without denying, censoring, or proliferating about your mental behavior. Notice that a blend of clear attention and emotional spaciousness supports this kind of awareness, and that the results of it are that one is calmer and wiser with regard to the mind. Once this detachment or non-involvement is established, then one can work on applying goodwill to moods and or thoughts that are affected by ill will and or renunciation in moods and thoughts that are affected by craving. So maybe that didn't totally go with my wisdom talk, but still useful. Oh, oops, that was the wrong one. That's why. Well, I'll open up for, well, all right, I'll just read this since we have a few minutes, because that was the wrong one. This is actually the right reflection that I wanted to read. Wisdom in Buddhism is primarily a relational experience rather than a storehouse or a storehouse or corpus of knowledge. One is wise about cause and effect, and hence one is alert to what's happening and how one is being affected. Because of this, the term discernment may, in many cases, be a more useful one than wisdom. In other words, wisdom is primarily something that you do so that an opening to transcendent clarity may occur. As the last, well, I'll end it there. Yeah. The highest development here, the highest development of wisdom, of the wisdom faculty, is clarity with regard to the Four Noble Truths and the selflessness and changeable nature of what we take our reality to be. So that's kind of the highest development, is a lot of what I was talking about, gaining that clarity. Okay. All right, that being said, thoughts, questions, reflections, things that you became clear to you either in my portion of the talk or what was read. Sorry if that was a little confusing with the readings. Or you can always type a question if you're shy. Oh, Michael put this book up. The book is called Paramis. It's a great book, by the way. And what I really like about it is that he talks, Sashito talks about the floods, basically the kind of floods of our senses and how we get kind of lost. And, we're using these paramis as really grounding and foundation and kind of keeping us afloat or staying off, not being flooded by sensuality, so by greed or even attachment. This is a lot of what we're talking about. So yeah, so that's in the chat. Any questions even earlier about the meditation itself?
Hi. So
Hi.
I guess I'll just say that, as you mentioned, these different levels, and that the practice piece of it might not take long to start to develop that awareness of your own thoughts, and to start to put the learnings into practice to start to better understand them. I can personally say that I've been joining you all for, let's say, I think it's been 4 months with consistency, once a week. And just in that time, my personal experience has been that taking these learnings and putting them into practice on a weekly and daily basis through meditation practice has really helped me to understand the ideas around creating clarity and separation from the emotions and from the thoughts that use the word flood. I think is a really great word that just flood me in any given moment. And then I just get lost in that moment and lose sight of anything else that really mattered. And I just wanted to share that my personal experience has been very, very much in these levels. It was just so helpful to hear that the levels broken down in the direction of wisdom, and that I'm feeling it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I feel like when like I said, when I first kind of like, I just always thought, wisdom is this kind of all achieving, like all knowing, and then you're kind of done. But no, it's kind of progressive and it's deepening as we kind of go. And why we call this insight practice is that every insight that you have, and I don't know about you, but what you just said makes sense to me. And the fact that, I think when I got serious, right, about meditation, I think the first year and definitely the first like couple meditation retreats there was like lights going on and oh my God, and this is amazing. And there was it was like there was a parting of the clouds. And I basically just went into that was just practice. I hadn't even really read anything about Buddhism. But all three are useful and all three are necessary. And that happens at different paces for different people. But I'm glad to hear that you have kind of experienced that. And I'm sure that other people have as well. And some of those early insights that I had, I still kind of call on today, they are the most poignant. Even though I've been doing this 2 decades and sat months and months on silent meditation retreats and been in monasteries, some of those first kind of deeper meditations and meditation experiences are some of the most lasting kind of insights, because it's the strength of finally breaking free from delusion, that can really help shift and why people get turned on when it comes to Buddhism. So thanks for saying that. Mikey.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for the meditation and the teaching, and to kind of echo what was just said a little bit, like I think and then to kind of like get into what you just said, like there's been like urgency and excitement for me with this, like, and lights turning on and everything. But I've been reading a book by Joseph Goldstein, Mindfulness, and and I remember in the breakthrough, Ajahn Amaro talking about mindfulness, of activities. When you're walking, know that you're walking. If you're eating, know that you're eating. And when I read it from Ajahn Amaro, you know, it opened the door to mindfulness for me. And then this book with Joseph Goldstein, for some reason it just clicked. Like when you're walking, like the whole who's walking, who's breathing, when I start asking myself that, it really opens up the idea of like no self or anatta, you know, like it clicked, it just clicks. And then I read something from Ajahn Chah today that if you're practicing mindfulness, it'll open up all of the Dhamma, like gradually, you know. And I think I've talked about this before. Like, I'm like, I want to read all the fucking books. Like, I want to know it all now, you know. But I think what mindfulness is helping me do is slow my roll. Like, just be like mindful of the moment. Like, I'm sitting, I'm listening, I'm meditating, I'm breathing. And then I'm asking myself, who's breathing? Who's meditating? So I guess what I'm saying is I see the relation between like the body, like materiality and awareness, you know, like, and the I making the me and the mind making is just, is slipping away, you know. And then with like these perfections, one of the things about Buddhism that I don't know if you've experienced this with people you've taught or people you've meditated with, or it's like there's so many fucking lists, like the 4 this, the 10 that,
there's 37 lists.
Yeah, so it's like
it's a list.
And then like I said, I'm always like, I need to fucking memorize all of these. But I guess what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is I'm kind of like slowing my roll and just like incrementally and gradually, like through mindfulness, just staying in the moment and doing what needs to be done in the moment, like sitting, meditating, listening, talking. And it makes more sense through mindfulness, all of it. And I can kind of slow that, like, need to be a kick-ass Buddhist, like all of that, because that's insane. It's more, I think mindfulness kind of just brings it all into like a more like humble, present, aware, like it just opens everything up. And that is an insight, and then more insights will come off of that. So I just wanted to share that reflection.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And it is, I think it's useful to see, and one of the floods that Ajahn Sucitto talks about is the flood of becoming. And part of that is that we get attached to, I mean, even me, like I remember I wanted to become a meditation teacher. Like that was, you know, I was like, oh, that person has clout, or that person knows things, and I want to know. And so therefore, I want to be that, you know. And that became that, actually, the ego of that, the ego of, kind of like a few weeks ago, I was talking about when I was in grad school and I always wanted to raise my hand and give my opinion. That was a form of becoming also. And some of the letting go of that, and just like you're saying, like, oh, just slowing my roll and letting it soak in, and not having to get all the lists right away. Like, you know what, man? Yes, there's 37 lists. There's a book called The 37 Wings of Awakening, which will give you all the lists. And you'll get them all eventually. And, you know, again, that's that first level of wisdom that we're talking about, right? This kind of learning and theory and understanding. And that's great. And it's not all there is, right? There's more to that. And that's the application, which is what you're talking about. So Ajahn Pasano, who it was the co-abbot of Abhayagiri Monastery, actually is now the abbot of Abhayagiri Monastery, because Ajahn Amaro went to England. But he was my primary teacher, where Ajahn Amaro is Noah's primary teacher. And he once told me, I mean, he said, like, he just did like this. He said, this much knowledge, this much practice. That's wisdom. That's how you're gaining in wisdom. And you know, we all have different doorways, but that's just one. Anyway, I appreciate your reflection, and even just that, you know, maybe to ask yourself, like, you know, is there a level of becoming like this kind of, that even we could call it the addiction to knowing that, or being seen or recognizing, that comes up for you or for any of us, so I appreciate that reflection. Yeah. All right, any last thoughts or practices? Rick, could it be argued? Let me pull this up here. I'm sure it could be argued, whatever it is. Could it be argued that in some ways wisdom in Buddhism is about the achievement of knowingless rather than knowing more, or knowing less rather than knowing more? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a beautiful frame. I think it's about forgetting or relearning. We're recommunicating, we're reconnecting to a different level of knowing. I think that's kind of what it's. So it's not about the well, what is it? Was it Socrates? I think it might have been, or Aristotle, that said, "All I know is I don't know nothing." Right. Also, there was some punk rockers that said that once. But this idea of like knowing less, yeah, and gaining more clarity, more wisdom by knowing less things, and more, I don't know, experience. So yes, to answer your question, I think that could be argued, and not even, probably wouldn't have much of an argue. But it is important to, like, we need to understand what the Four Noble Truths are. We need to understand what anatta is. What selflessness is. But that can all come just by practicing too. This final thing I'll say, the first practice that I was ever given, and what is considered to be the practice of the Buddha after his awakening, after his enlightenment, is called Anapanasati. And so I kind of spoke to that earlier, and that's really the practice that I gave tonight, although I added a little bit more to it. But Anapanasati is the wisdom of the in and out breath. In other words, all can be known by being present for each breath. All can be known. All of the Dharma can be revealed. Yeah. So thank you for your time and attention, your participation. Next week we'll move into energy and effort, which is interesting. It's actually more interesting than it sounds. It's not just about doing it. It's there's more involved. I've had some interesting energetic experiences through meditation that I'll share some of also next week. And then Mike put up the link to donations. And so please know that if, we are still trying to kind of pay the rent, and any little bit and every little bit helps. You can also become a monthly donor. We are talking about doing a day long here pretty soon, where we're going to have all of the teachers kind of take segments, like a morning, afternoon, evening. And that's going to be, Rachel's kind of heading that up. So that'll be coming up soon. Yeah. So I look forward to seeing y'all next week, and just to take a moment and soak in the goodness of your own practice, your own intention to be here, to sit, to be present, to awaken, to find that freedom for ourselves. Soak that in, soak that intention in. And then in the next breath, just recognizing that we do this practice not only for ourselves or for our own awakening and enlightenment, but also for the enlightenment of all beings everywhere. May we all be free.